There's a growing number of people in our world who believe that Jesus never lived. They think that the New Testament is filled with mythology that was plagiarized from other religions and adopted by the early church. We hear that scholars question Jesus' existence and say that there are good reasons to doubt it. So what do non-Christians have to say about whether Jesus really lived or not? Well, virtually everyone in the United States has heard of Jesus, even if they don't go to church or read the Bible very much. Just about everybody but the most militant of atheists generally think that he was a pretty good person. He told people to be neighborly and love each other, but there are those few who have a genuine contempt for religion of every kind, and for Christianity in particular. And these people are often very vocal, so we shouldn't be surprised if we run across someone who says that Jesus never lived or that he was nothing more than a mythological figure created by the early church. Atheist apologists often claim not only that Jesus never lived, but that scholars have proof of it. They claim that experts know that Christians plagiarized other religions in Greece, Rome, and Egypt, and that nothing in Christianity is original or unique. They say if you just go back and look at other religions in the Greco-Roman world and in the ancient Near East, you'll find that Christianity offers nothing new. Everything that you read in Scripture was taught somewhere else before the Bible was written. Now, this is potentially earth-shaking news for Christians who may have never heard of this idea before, and it's a big topic. But we're going to ask the question here, what do scholars really believe about the supposedly mythological Jesus? Was he a real person, or just the creation of someone's overactive imagination? Well, this is a modern view called mythicism. And while proponents are very vocal about their beliefs, the truth is that this idea is not an issue of scholarly debate. Many academics don't even know much about it because it is such a fringe idea. It's simply not discussed by professional historians or biblical scholars, and it's never really been accepted by mainstream scholarship either. This is a very different story from what you'll hear from Christianity's critics. They will typically say that the fact that Jesus never existed is well known to scholars everywhere and might even be a kind of trade secret that everybody knows, but no one talks about because doing so might put their job at risk, especially if they teach in a seminary or divinity school. Well, this just isn't true, and we're going to get a few quotes from what agnostics and atheists believe about the historicity of Jesus, and then we're going to see what some other non-Christians in the ancient world had to say about him. First of all, we've got Bart Ehrman, who is professor at the highly respected University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's called himself a happy agnostic, but has also said that he doesn't believe in God, so he's basically a full-blown atheist. In his book, Did Jesus Exist?, he says, I do not discuss mythicists in class, since, as I've repeatedly indicated, the mythicist view does not have a foothold or even a toehold among modern critical scholars of the Bible. He also says, Jesus existed, and those vocal persons who deny it do so not because they've considered the evidence with the dispassionate eye of the historian, but because they have some other agenda. The late New Testament scholar Maurice Casey served as a professor at the University of Nottingham, and in his book Jesus, Evidence and Argument, or Mythicist Myths, he said, I conclude that the mythicist arguments are completely spurious from beginning to end. They have been mainly put forward by incompetent and unqualified people. And generally speaking, this is true. It's virtually impossible to find anyone with a PhD in a relevant field who denies the existence of Jesus. Most people who do so are hobbyists and other non-specialists who typically reference each other's writings and have no engagement with real scholarship. In fact, John Dickson, who teaches at the University of Sydney, issued a challenge to mythicists. He said, I will eat a page of my Bible if someone can find me just one full professor of ancient history, classics, or New Testament in an accredited university somewhere in the world who thinks Jesus never lived. To date, no one has met Dickson's challenge, and even if they did, it would only be one person out of tens of thousands of scholars. Well, there are times when individuals who are mythicists change their minds. The late G.A. Wells was a German professor at the University of London, but was also widely acknowledged as one of the most articulate defenders of the idea that Jesus was nothing more than a myth created by the early church. He published his views in several books, the most famous of which was titled, Did Jesus Exist? It's noteworthy that in time, Wells actually changed his view and accepted the fact that Jesus really lived, even though he remained a committed atheist. Well, that's nice that virtually all qualified scholars and the majority of modern agnostics and atheists all agree that there was a historical Jesus. But what do the primary sources have to say? And this is the important part. We always want to go back to the primary sources, the original material written by ancient authors. Our first writer is Flavius Josephus. He was a Jewish historian who worked for the Flavian dynasty of Roman emperors. His work, titled The Antiquities of the Jews, contains two references to Jesus. The first reference is called the Testimonium Flavianum. It mentions that Jesus was a popular teacher who was tried by Jewish authorities and crucified by Pontius Pilate. He also mentions that the Christians derived their name from him. He says, "Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man. He was a doer of startling deeds, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. And he gained a following both among many Jews and many of Greek origin. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day." The second reference in the Antiquities just barely mentions Jesus in passing as the brother of James, who he says was killed by Jewish authorities. He says, "Ananus assembled the Sanhedrin of judges, and brought before them the brother of Jesus who was called Christ, whose name was James. And when he had formed an accusation against them as breakers of the law, he delivered them to be stoned." The vast majority of scholars think that Josephus' first reference is legitimate, but had a few details added by a later copyist, and that seems to be true. However, there is widespread consensus that this reference to Jesus is authentic. His second reference is virtually undisputed. There is no doubt that Josephus was aware of Jesus' existence. Now, we also find Jesus referenced in another Roman source titled the Annals, which was written by the Roman historian Tacitus. He says that the name Christians came from Christus, who was executed by Pontius Pilate during the reign of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. He says, "Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular." Here, all of Tacitus's references are spot on. That is, everything seems to line up. And so when he says Christus, this is a Latinized form of the Greek word Christos, from which we get our word Christ. He mentions the extreme penalty, which was a reference to crucifixion. He also says that this movement appeared in Judea and then later appeared also in Rome. And that's true. Jesus lived in Judea, and a short time after his death, we see the church established in the empire's capital city. We also have to remember that Tacitus is what we call a hostile source. He was not a friend of Christianity, and we know this because he calls Christianity a mischievous superstition. In Rome, a superstition, or a superstitio, included much more than refusing to walk under ladders or avoiding black cats. A superstitio was considered politically subversive and even dangerous by the Romans. It was something that could ultimately threaten or undermine the security of the Roman state because it involved improper worship and not reverencing the gods properly. So this tells us that Tacitus was not mentioning Christians as a favor to them. He thought they were a problem. Well, the Greek writer Lucian of Samosata also makes a reference to Jesus in his satirical biography of the philosopher Peregrinus Proteus. "The Christians, you know, worship a man to this day, the distinguished personage who introduced their novel rites, and was crucified on that account. You see, these misguided creatures start with the general conviction that they are immortal for all time, which explains the contempt of death and voluntary self-devotion which are so common among them. And then it was impressed on them by their original lawgiver that they are all brothers from the moment they are converted, and deny the gods of Greece and worship the crucified sage and live after his laws. All this they take quite on faith, with the result that they despise all worldly goods alike, regarding them merely as common property. Well, this reference is brief, and it doesn't mention Jesus by name. However, the way he describes the beliefs of the Christians makes it unmistakably clear that he is referring to Jesus. He says that the Christians worship the crucified sage who founded their beliefs. He says they believe in immortality and consider each other brothers and don't value worldly goods, but instead give them to others and consider them common property to be shared. All of these details can be found in the New Testament. Well, Lucian clearly shows that he knows something about the early Christians and about Jesus. Well, the verdict of both ancient historians and modern scholars is clear. Jesus was an historical figure who lived, preached, and died in first century Judea. Details provided in the New Testament are verified in extra-biblical sources. Friendly and hostile sources alike all mention the name of Christ. Attempts to dismiss the historical portrait of Jesus are laughed at by specialists who have expertise in the relevant academic fields. While critics of Christianity may try their best to convince us that Jesus never lived, it seems like they're really just trying to succeed in convincing themselves.